Hello everyone. Welcome to our tutorial on getting musical animations and events in Unity while using the Wwise audio system. We're also going to make use of Koreographer to glue the Wwise-driven music with the Unity side actions and events and animations. The goal of what we're going to do today and what we're going to show you how to do is something that looks a little bit like this. Well, that looks like fun. So let's get to building it. The first thing we'll point out here is that we have Unity 2018.4.29, the latest version of Unity 2018.4 available at the time of recording. And we also have the Wwise adventure game opened up inside of this project, or inside of this version of the editor. You can get that available in the Wwise launcher over here under samples. There's the Wwise adventure game. You go through the installation of that and you'll be able to open it up in Unity. Specifically, we have installed the Wwise 2019.2 and that is here. And this is that same project, Wwise adventure game, running in the Wwise editor here, this application. Okay, great. So now that we're in Unity, the one last piece that we need to show you is that in this project, we have already set up the Koreographer asset that kind of glues Unity and Wwise together in terms of creating a message stream. We'll cover that later. For now, it's important to note that that is either available generally through the asset store if you're in Unities that support that, or if in the My Assets section of the package manager. At any event, Koreographer is available in here. I can show you here. We have the choreography editor and the MIDI converter. This is the Koreographer Professional Edition, which supports the Wwise integration. Let's dive in and take a look and see what we need to do. There are some prerequisites to getting Wwise set up within Unity in such a way that Koreographer can work its magic. And to do that, we're going to dive in and look at two things. First, we have over here in the Wwise project, we need to go into the project settings and make sure that under sound banks, the generate metadata file and the generate XML metadata boxes are checked. What that does is it causes Wwise, when the sound banks are built or generated, it will also output a little bit of a metadata file about what files were generated. Choreographer's integration uses that to map the audio files to the internal IDs that Wwise uses at runtime when the game is actually running. The next thing we need to do in here is pick the music that we want to use to map that animation. Like what is the music that we want to say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if the, some element in the game, those boxes, so it's crates, for instance, or the barrels, would resize themselves based in time with the music to give that kind of connection to the music. And we're going to look over here in the interactive music hierarchy, and we're going to go look down specifically in the music regions section, and we're going to look at the village. There's a lot of options here. We're just going to look at this here. We're going to look at the village layers. I'm going to check this box just so everything is nice and bright. And we'll see that there are several layers here. There's choir cave, clarinet cave, flutes cave, a bunch of these things. What we're going to do is we're going to single out the clarinet cave and the harp cave. The clarinet cave we'll use for the crates. The harp cave we will use for the barrels. A side note really quickly about this structure of the music here in Wwise. This music segment internally has 5 music tracks that are set to random playback. They have if you come down here and right click, you'll see they have the random step configured on them. That means that out of these 6 layers, the flutes cave layer, which is not random step. It is normal. We'll play every single loop of this piece of music. All of the other sections will randomly play or not play, which gives you a variation in terms of how that works. Now that we have the Audiokinetic Wwise stuff figured out, what music we want, the project is set up correctly for us, we are going to add the integration between Wwise and Koreographer. To do that, you will get a Unity package, usually called the Wwise integration package. Sonic Bloom provides that. And you can go in here, you'll see all these files that are added, and we're going to just click import. This will allow the choreography editor to work correctly with the Wwise integration. Once this installation and asset compilation is completed, all done, we're ready to go. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is build some what is called choreography data. That is, we're going to use to look at the audio file itself, those two audio files that we picked out, the cave clarinet and the cave harp, and we're going to create some metadata for each of those that contains information about what are the signals, the timings, the data that we want embedded in the audio to send to the game, and we'll take a look at what that looks like. In order to do this, the first thing we're going to do is open up the choreography editor. Now in the choreography editor, we notice one thing initially, and that is there's this big green button, which you can't press yet. We'll be able to do in a moment. And we also have this warning here that says the audio clip can't be played back because Unity's audio system has been disabled. That is an effect of the Wwise installation. When Wwise is installed, it disables Unity's audio system to save some resources when the game is built. That's fine. That doesn't affect Koreographer at all, except at edit time. The choreography editor is built inside of Unity, and in order to play back audio and preview audio in the choreography editor, it needs access to Unity's audio system. So we're going to have to enable it at least during edit time, and we'll see how to do that in a moment. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new choreography. I'll come in here, I'll click New Choreography. Under these assets, I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call it Choreography. I'm going to create a new choreography asset. We will call it, let's see, Cave Clarinet Choreo, because we're going to start with the clarinet song first. Save. Okay, great. Here we have this audio clip stuff. An audio clip is Unity's audio asset. That's how you access audio files when it's a Unity audio project. But we're going to click over here on this audio file option, which uses just audio data on the file system. So that enables this new load audio file button, which we'll click. And we're going to pop back here to the Wwise project because we need to locate the, let's see, game param. Nope, we need to locate, where is it? The music, which I believe is under Originals, SFX, and Music. And in here, we will find the MFYG 3 clarinet cave.wav file. Perfect. I'm going to open that up, and there we have it. That file right there is the one that we were looking for. If I play it back, oh, I can't play it back yet because we haven't enabled the audio system. So let's do that. If I click this button, it explains what's happening. It gives you a warning that says, hey, in order to actually hear the audio, we need to enable the audio system. Do you want to do this? You can also disable this again later. And you click OK. And now if I preview it, I can hear the music just fine, exactly as I would expect. Great. So what we need to do next is adjust the tempo here. This song happens to be 120 BPM. Let's see, the next step is to create a choreography track, and the choreography asset contains a whole bunch of data, the metadata about the music itself. What's the tempo? What's the BPM? What is the audio file all this data should be connected to? It then makes connections to another type of asset called the choreography track, which contains the actual metadata of the timing information. You know, what are the times and if any payload, which is extra data that you want to send with, you know, one of these events from the audio to the game, what kind of information do you want to store in that? So we're going to make a new one of those, that track. We're going to put it in the same choreography track folder, and we are going to call it, let's see, this is going to be, because we want to use the clarinet for crates, we're going to call this crate grow or crate scale. Crate scale, perfect. Actually, crate scale track. Haha. Because what we're going to do, that will add this track event ID in here. We want to come in here and delete track, so that crate scale is the term used, and we'll see this later. But this is the ID that other assets will use to connect to and say, hey, when I hear something happening with crate scale, I want to know about it. So now we have the ability to come in here. I can double click to create a new event. What this does is it says, hey, at this time in the audio file, send a signal to whoever is listening to the crate scale events. So I'm going to delete that because I don't need it. And instead, it is time for us to go ahead and track out the song. So we want to listen here. We're going to go for each of those notes there. I'm going to hit back on the keyboard to hop back. So there's bum, bum, ba, bum, ba, bum, bum. And there's a little bit of some kind of staccato rhythm going on there. And what we're going to do is use Choreographer's divide beat by here. And we're going to do, I want to say 4, so that we can see these subdivisions of the beat. And that'll let us get more precise timing in time with the music. The other thing we're going to do to make this a little bit easier is we're going to drop the speed. Now I can pull the speed down by doing, you know, this, or I can even just use the up and down arrow keys. You can see that modifying there in order to slow down or speed up the audio to make it easier to see when the onset for each note happens. Great, so the first note is immediate, so I'm gonna go into the draw mode. By the way, we're gonna use the float payload here because the float payload carries a number. And it can be a decimal point, whatever you want to do. So what we'll do here is I'll show you here. In draw mode, I created an event that has a float payload. What this does is it says, hey, I can put a number in here, and I actually do want a 0 to start. I want to basically, the scale number here is going to be between some values that I can set, say 90% of its normal size and 110% of its normal size. So we're going to start here because in the progression of notes for this piece of music, this is the lowest tone, and that feels good. So we'll start there, and I'm just going to quickly go through and track this stuff out here. We're gonna lay down the events first, and then we will go back and modify or set the payload values. Great, and the reason I'm going to stop here is because the second half of this track is just a repeated version of the front half. And we will, for the most part, we'll see what to do with that in a second. But because that's a duplicate, that means this note here maps to this one. I'm going to delete that, and we'll come back to it when we get to showing how to very quickly just make the latter half of this emulate the first half. So the first thing we're going to come in here is say this is, we're going to go back into selection mode so we don't accidentally make any more events. That was a 0. We wanted that. Whoops. Yeah, okay, good. And then we want to come in here and we're going to go, all right, great. I want this to be a 0.3. I've already gone through and figured out these values just so we don't waste a whole bunch of time. there is a way Choreographer has to make exactly what I'm doing right now, a piece of cake. And that is to use the MIDI importer. So the MIDI converter allows you to just very quickly import this stuff, the music, the notes from the composition, and just auto-generate the stuff effectively. But it is doable by hand. It takes a little bit of time, but it doesn't all art. We're gonna come in here, we're gonna finish this up. Okay, so now we have just that last one there, that kind of span note that we mentioned before. What we're gonna do there is use a curve event. Now I'm gonna back up the playhead a bit with the arrow keys, left and right. What I'm gonna do is kind of map that intensity with an animation curve, just a value swipe. The payload that I want here is a curve payload type. And I'm gonna go here and draw one. And as we said before, we knew that it was kind of an early onset. So we're gonna click here and, whoops, wrong one. I need to go and click span. Now that we have that, I can come in here and say, draw me that curve. I'm gonna end exactly when that ends. So now I have this thing here. I'm gonna come in and set this. I now have this curve, which I can go and edit, and we'll see that when I modify this, the first thing I'm gonna do here is set this value. I want this to end at 0.8 for the value. And you'll see here that this is kind of adjusted. I can move this and we'll see that over here, that shape of that curve is adjusting as well. So I'm going to hit Command A in this curve to select all of the these little keyframes, these little points. And I'm going to right click on them and tell them to be clamped auto. And that'll create this nice smooth curve, which let's take a look and see what that will look like in Choreographer here. If I go back and I open up the visualizer, I can come in and right click here, play from here, and we'll see this sphere here will resize based on what that curve looks like along with the music. So that gives us just a kind of a really basic idea of what the curve will feel like. Okay, great. So now we have all of this stuff tracked out. We have this going from 0 to 0.8. We have this last piece at 1. We have all of these values here. I'm going to select all of these, because these are the ones that we want duplicated. In fact, let's double check the end there and make sure we don't have this duplication here. There's that held note. And there's none of that. So we do not want those two final notes. Those are kind of a bridge between the two sections. So I'm going to select all of that I want. And we know that it starts here at this time. So I'm going to leave snap to beat on, and I'm going to click the clone key, and then I'm going to click right there. And what we've done is we've just duplicated all of that stuff. All of those numbers and everything are there. Everything is snap to beat as we expect. What's fun is that this is the same progression of notes that we have in the harp as well. Same exact timing because they are layered. So what we'll be able to do is reuse all of this markup that we did for that data, and we'll show you how to do that now. So we're going to make a new choreography. I'm going to click here, the new choreography button again, and earlier in this video, I created the file, but I created the new choreography folder, but I created the asset in the assets directory. I have moved it over to make that more, simpler. We're going to click on this cave clarinet choreo, and I'm going to change the clarinet here to harp because that is the music we're going to use. Save and call it anything I want. It just makes it easier to identify. Next thing I'm going to do here is click the audio file, load audio file again. I'm going to click load audio file, and I'm going to go back again into the Wwise project, originals, SFX, and music. And I will pick the MFYG 3 harp cave wave. Awesome. Now we notice here that the timing is off. There's this empty part at the beginning. We'll cover what to do to handle that in a moment. Before we get to that, we need to once again fix up the tempo. It should be 120. That's good. Now everything lines up as we expect. Perfect. Okay, and the next step is to create a new choreography track. This will be similar to the way we had a crate scale. We're going to need a barrel scale. So I'm going to create a new choreography track here. I'm going to take the cave scale track and I'm going to call it the barrel scale. I'm going to save this. And I am then going to come in here. And now that we have, I'm going to again delete the track part of that. Keep it as barrel scale. Excellent. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to right click and I'm going to say paste. And you'll see that right where I right clicked, because snap to beat is on, it snapped it to that location and everything else followed it. And you can see that these values still line up. So if we back up and if we hit the V key here, we should be able to see everything work as we expect. I'm going to set the speed back up to 1. And even with the harp, everything is mapping as we expect. Excellent. So that is the choreography data made. Let's move on to the next section. I'm going to save the project here. Once again, I just did this, but I'm going to explain it while I do it. Saving the project will save the choreography assets in the project separately from the scene. Great. Now that we have the choreography data ready, which is, here's the metadata that allows, assets, Unity itself to say, oh, well, this just happened in the audio, let me do something with it. The elements in the scene need to know about this metadata. So we need to go and tell elements in the scene about the metadata and what to do with it. We need a way to connect Koreographer and the choreography data to Wwise. And there are some components that will help us do exactly that. We'll cover that. And then we need to make sure that the existing controls in this project are able to make that final connection between the choreographer side of the integration with the Wwise side of the integration and kind of merge the two so that communication can happen. What that will allow is music will play back in Wwise. Wwise will tell Choreographer, here's what's going on in the music. Choreographer will say, okay, great. Here are a bunch of events that are happening inside of the music. Unity, do something with it. And then the elements in the scene will say, oh, great, stuff's happening in the music. Let me do something. The first thing that we're going to do is look at those crates and those barrels and say, okay, we want them to scale themselves based on this data that we put into the audio. We're going to need to write a short script that takes the events that we get from these from the choreography, unpacks that payload, and then uses it to drive the scale of the object in some way. Luckily, some of the content has already been provided for us. Choreographer has a demo script called the Cube Scaler, which is a script that just shows how the built-in demo content works for Choreographer. The first thing we're going to do here, though, is dive into the world, and actually, we are going to, before that, we're actually going to come down here and do a search for the crate prefab, which we have found right here. And I'm going to go in and add a new component. We're going to find that cube scaler. Great, that's added. By the way, the cube scaler is in Choreographer demos and cube scaler under the add component menu. And we're going to say, okay, great, I need to modify this script. So I'm going to open that up, and here we are. So in the cube scaler, we need to tell it about the float payload. If we look down here under adjust scale, it already understands what a curve payload is. It's already handling this. The way this script was built is it receives an event and it says, do you have a curve payload? If you do, I'll do something with it. Well, our choreography data has both curve payloads and float payloads, and we want to be able to drive something with that. So we're going to modify this script a little bit. As we can see here in the adjust scale method, it changes the local scale by setting it to something that is related to our curve value. In this case, it lerps, which is just a linear interpolation between the min scale and max scale, which we set up here, default 0.5 to 1.5. And we're going to say, okay, I want this, give me a value between these two numbers based on the percentage of the way through them. That's what lerp does, and we're just going to use this as it is. Because we're going to be doing this twice, we're going to say, okay, I want just a general value here. I'm going to set it to default to 0, and then I'm going to say, all right, we already have this curve payload. I'm going to check and see if there's a float payload. So I'm going to say else if evt.has float payload. And then I'm going to do something very similar to what's going on up here. I'm going to say value equals evt.get value of, get float value. And that will just tell me the float value that it has. This has the curve at time part because the span has a duration and it covers a certain amount of time. So what is the value at any given time? Float value is just one number. We can just say, give me the number. So that's what's going on there. The other thing we want to do here is change this so that it's the value instead of curve value. That breaks this. We're going to rename this to value so it works again. And then, oh look, we have the same value being used set here and here. I'm just going to take this scaling section and move it to the bottom. Okay, great. Now we either unpack the curve value and store it in this variable, or the float value and store it in that variable. And then we use it to set the scale, the X, Y, and Z components of the scale so that we can say, get some number between some size. Excellent. That is all we need to do. Now we'll come back over here and we'll make put some settings on the cube scaler itself. The event, we're going to call it crate scale because this is the crate. And I'm going to set the minimum scale to 0.9, and I'm going to set the, let's do 8.85. We'll give it a little bit more there. And I'm going to set this to 1.15. That'll give us a good 30% size difference from its minimum size to its maximum size, which is a good amount to see that scaling happen. Okay, because this prefab is an asset, I'm going to say file, save project again, and that should save that. Now we're going to repeat that effectively for the barrel. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say barrel. I'm going to get this barrel prefab. And I'm going to come down, and just as I did last with the crate, I'm going to add the, where is it? The cube scaler that has our modifications. We've already done that work, so we can just use it again as is. I'm going to come in here and select the barrel scale because this is the barrel. And just as I did in the other one, I'm going to set this to 0.85 and I'm going to set this to 1.15. I'm going to save the project again, saving the asset for the prefab. And we're basically ready on the receiving end. So the next thing that we need to do is add Choreographer's components to the scene. That is going to, there's two components that we need to add, and then another special asset specifically for the Choreography-Wise integration, Choreographer-Wise integration. Specifically, there is the Choreographer component, which is kind of the nexus, the core that does all of the event notification. If we look over here, we register with that component, and that is what will allow everybody to kind of listen for those events. So we need that. We also need the piece of component that will say, hey, my responsibility is listening to what's going on inside of Wise. And I will tell the choreographer component, hey, these events are happening and you should tell everyone listening what's going on. The third and final piece that we need to do is create a special asset that contains the link between the audio file and the special ID that Wise uses internally to track its playback of any given file. Things are not stored by file name inside of Wwise itself. So we need a way to reverse that and kind of pull apart what's happening inside of Wwise. And that's the piece that will get us the rest of the way there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add the choreographer component to the Wwise game object. We're going to click here. I'm going to click on add component, and I'm going to type in choreographer. The other place for this is under choreographer. That provides this component. The next thing we need to do is add that Wwise music visor, which we're going to do on the manager's game object here. So we're going to click here on the managers. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to click add component. We're going to go into choreographer, Wwise, and the Wwise music visor. That gives us this option here for something called the choreography set. That's the piece we need that's going to connect the choreography data that we created before to what goes on inside of Wwise. The choreography data as it exists right now is simply added metadata to the files, but Wwise doesn't work with the file names. So right now, Choreographer doesn't have a good connection. Creating this choreography set will provide us with that connection. So we're going to go back here into the choreography folder. I'm going to right click, say create, and say this Wwise choreography set. I've now added this here. I'm going to call it the Village Music Choreo set, just to make it easy to understand what it is. Under choreographies, I'm going to increase this to size 2. And now I have these two options here. You'll see when I add the barrel scale, nope, that's the track. When I had the cave clarinet choreography here, it goes through and it identified this media ID, and it shows you what that media ID is. Here's a harp choreography. These values here are what Wwise uses internally. So now we have a mapping between, hey, if you see this media ID, this is the choreography that is meant. And that's what this little piece does. I should point out that if the choreography doesn't show a number here, it may be that your project settings didn't have the generate the XML metadata file. Set that as we showed you earlier in the video, and then the Wwise picker, you can generate the banks that will output the necessary XML file, and then you can go up into the assets, Wwise choreographer, update choreography media IDs button. And if you click that, it will run through, find all of the Wwise choreography set assets in your project, and then remap all of those values. So if you miss it at the onset, there is a way to do it again later without having to reset all the values. Okay, great. Now that we have this choreography, Wwise choreography set, excuse me, we need to put it into the component. So I can come in here, I can click that button, or I can just, click and drag this into that spot. And now the Wwise music visor is all set up. Excellent. The last piece that we need to know about is what music do we care to listen to out of the entire set of data that Wwise is working on. The way that the integration works is it looks at all the music being played through any Wwise event. Now, a Wwise event, again, is a signal from Unity to Wwise to play back music, to change the mix in some way, to send a signal to the Wwise side that says, do something to the music mix or the sound mix or the dialogue mix, the whole audio space. When, as an example, when we play music, there might be the play music AK event or a Wwise event. And what we care about is all the music that plays as a result of that event. What's going on in that? Now, the basic way to do this in the integration is to go in, and we're going to go into the managers here. I'll show you how this would work as a very simple way. So we'll go in and select the AK event. And then we are going to say brought in the game object script, which is the Wwise one, and that is something that is the AK event needs. So we're going to leave that alone for now. I'm going to select normally what I would do. We're not going to do this as a real thing because it's not how the project is set up. But I could go in here and I could say objects, and I could have a door effect or something like that. If we had choreography for that, we would want to pick what event would trigger that audio. And then I would come up here into the use callback, and I would select the game object that has the Wwise music visor on it. In this case, it is this game object, but I will drag that over anyway. Oops, there's a right click. Put it in there, great. And then I will, under the callback functions, I have to tell it, hey, handle AK, AK callback. And the flags need to be the AK duration. I need to have, they can have multiple here. So I need the duration, end of event, and I need to have the get source play position options. With those three callbacks enabled, the Wwise music visor will be able to do its work. What these are information from Wwise, where Wwise can say, hey, an audio of this duration is going to play. Here's the audio. Hey, this audio file just stopped playing. Hey, you know, we'll allow you to ask us what are the times at which this current music is playing. With those callbacks enabled, and the callback being directed at the Wwise music visor, the connection is made. Unfortunately, this isn't how, it's not as easy as this in this project. So I'm going to remove this component and remove the AK game object. They are not needed in this case. Now that I have these things set up here, I can go say like, okay, great. The audio in this case, in this project, is actually triggered from script. And it's done so in the game manager script. So I'm going to double click on this so that we can configure this script to tell the Wwise visor, the music visor, what it needs to do. And to do that, the first thing that we're going to do is say, add a link to the Wwise music visor in the inspector so that we can make the connection and the game manager can talk to the Wwise music visor. So to do that, we need to add the namespace for the Wwise music visor. And that is going to be under sonicbloom.choreo. Now this is where the general stuff is. And under this layer, you get the choreography scripts. We're going to go into players. This is where you get things in the general choreographer asset. You get, you know, the simple music player, the multi-music player. That all uses Unity audio. The Wwise integration goes a step further and adds the Wwise section. And that, using this, will allow us to find that Wwise music visor or the Wwise supervisor, if that's what you're using. We're going to find, come down here to modes here, and we're going to drop down. I'm going to add a new header. I'm going to call this choreographer. I'll do it in all caps to match the other stuff. And I am going to add, a new field here called the Wwise music visor. And I'm going to call it music visor. The next thing we're going to do here is let that compile, and once it's compiled, we'll make the connection. Great, that's done. Let's pop over. We'll go back to it and say, now that we have this reference, let's make use of it. So we're going to scroll down here, and in the start function, we have the music event post to game object. Now this music event is, let's see, it's a new music event. And right, it is configured externally, but so we have this music event. It's configured over here in here, music event, music region. So that is what we want to play. The village music that we looked at the very beginning plays through the music event. So we're going to need to hook into this call somehow. Conveniently, there's already a hook to the callback function being done here, which is defined here. So what we need to do is say, hey, when this AK event, this Wwise event is being posted or sent to Wwise, we need to make sure that the callback types include the duration, end of event, and get source play position settings. That will allow us to properly handle the callback function. We'll get this function called when the Wwise visor needs it. Sorry, the music visor. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to change this to a uint, because that's the type we can see here that is actually needed in the post event. And I'm going to say, okay, we need more than one. So I'm going to call this a uint. And I'm going to do a logical OR so that we can have multiple of these these enums set at once. Basically create an enum mask. That is going to look like we have the AK callback type. So I'm going to come in here and AK callback type dot. I'm going to do duration. I'm going to do end of event. And I'm going to do the source, enable get source play position. Okay, great. Those are ready to go. The last thing we need here, well, we actually don't even need that. We can just remove that. It's redundant. Great. So that's basically ready to go in the setup. Now the callback function, when this is called, what we want to do is say, okay, if this AK music sync user queue, choreographer doesn't care about it, so it doesn't matter. We're going to say it's going to get callback types of all these other things rather than that music queue. But we need, if any of these events come in, we need to send those to the Wwise or the music visor. So instead, what we're going to do here is say, we're going to say else, because the music visor doesn't care about this one. Send the callbacks to the music visor. And to do that, we're going to use the music visor, and we're going to say handle AK callback. And here's a quick description of it and what is, here are the flags needed. So I'm going to come in here and say, okay, I need to forward all this data to the Wwise music visor. I'll start just doing that now in cookie, in type, and then finally in info. So in info. Okay. And that is it. With this, the Wwise music visor is going to get the callbacks from Wwise that it needs to say, okay, you're ready to go. Here's the end of event. You can shut stuff down. Here's the duration so that you can know that these things are playing back. These are the pieces that the music visor relies upon to get the information that it needs in order to compare to that metadata, the choreography metadata, and trigger those events through the choreography, the choreographer component that we set up in the scene. And now that the script is ready to go from the game manager, and we have, of course, the connection here available, we have to go make sure that connection is connected. So what we'll do here is say, okay, here's the music visor. We're going to use the music visor that's on the manager itself. So I'm going to drag the manager over here and add it in. And now that connection is done, I'm going to save the scene, and all the pieces are there, and everything should, all this, the callbacks should flow through correctly. The messages will come from Wwise into the Wwise music visor, and then the Wwise music visor will send information to choreographer, which will then send messages to the system. And we should see crates and barrels resizing based on those messages. So now let's see it in motion. I'm gonna hit the play button, and we can see there already that we have, well, we had the barrels working and the harp was playing. Now we have the clarinet playing. And we can see that those are resizing, as we said. There we go with the harp again. Now this is happening because the music segment had random layers playing back. Every time it loops, it picks, randomly which layers should be playing and which shouldn't. In this case, we had just the clarinet again. Okay. That about does it for us here. We hope that you enjoyed this tutorial and were able to pick up something from it. and we hope it helps you out in your projects. Best of luck, and looking forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.